Hey friends, I'd like to take a moment and mention my new virtual series coming up October 4th, Autumn Yin Yoga with Face Mask. I'm partnering with Namaste Beauty. This time of year, Yin Yoga is especially important because it can be an opportunity to process unprocessed emotions and make space for letting go and to open up for what lies ahead. Each class will gently open up the chest, the lungs, as well as will hold postures that support digestion and promote elimination. A pumpkin spice face mask will be applied before the final rest of each class. This 4-week series starts on Sunday, October 4th through the 25th from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you would like to sign up, the link is in the show notes, and the deadline to RSVP is Wednesday, October 30th, just to ensure that you receive your mask in the mail before the start of the series. Now back to the show. I hope you enjoy this upcoming episode. Welcome to the Yoga and podcast. I am your host, Ashley Weber, a yoga and embodiment teacher who is living, learning, and loving every day here in beautiful Austin, Texas. And I am so curious about all things yoga and today we will finish out our 3-week series called The Yamas, Boons, and Niyamas with the lovely Gioconda Parker. Today's episode will explore the subject of the Niyamas, which is the final episode in this series. You might pause here and check out our previous 2 episodes, number 37 and 38, on the Yamas and the Boons if you have not yet. A side note, Gioconda Parker has other episodes she has done with us, episode number 9, 17, and 21. She talks about the shadow, the creation cycle, and fear. Check those out as well when you get a chance. But in this particular episode today, Gia will share her depth of knowledge about the expansive topic of the Niyamas. What? Never heard of it before? Well, Gia breaks this yoga philosophy down in a way that's applicable to one's life. I learned a lot from this conversation, and I know you will too. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode, y'all. Joining us on today's episode is a friend of the show. Check out her other episodes she's done with us and this series on the Yamas and the Niyamas and the Boons. She is a yoga teacher, teacher trainer, and transpersonal psychologist, and amazing human being, Gioconda Parker. Hey, Gia.
Hi, Ashley. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good.
Good. Long time.
Long time. I know. We've got to stop meeting like this.
So we've been doing a series about the Yamas, the Niyamas, and the Boons. And so if you're listening and you have yet to check out the previous 2 episodes, I highly recommend checking those out. We are at the 3rd part of our 3-part series, and today is all about what is called the Niyamas. So, how would you describe the Niyamas, Gioconda?
Oh, well, if we look at the 8 limbs of yoga, then we'd say Niyama is the 2nd limb of the 8 limbs of yoga. And we were looking at the yamas as these ways of observing the nature of our relationship with others in the outer world. So if we take that to the next step, the niyamas, then those will be the ways of looking at our relationship within ourselves. And it's how do we come into a more harmonious internal experience? right? So there's an inner aspect to the yamas as well, of course, because we are part of the relationship. So when we say, we're observing loving kindness towards others, of course, that starts with observing loving kindness with our relationship with ourselves. The niyamas are sort of, what are the active ways that we move towards a more harmonious experience within ourselves? Is one way we can look at them. And there's sort of the more classical interpretation, which we said is, of course, the restraints and the observances. So we're looking, these are the observances, whereas with the restraints and the observances. So that's where we are. So the niyamas are these ways of moving towards a more harmonious inner experience. And so if you do want to look at it from that lens of restraints and observances, then what's significant about that is to say, okay, there were a lot of right? Ahimsa, asteya, aparigraha, right? So there's a lot of like doing the opposite, which does make sense in that context of like, those are the ways that we restrain ourselves from certain behaviors. And when we get to the niyamas, then these are the things that we observe. And the way that those two teachings, the 10 teachings, come together is both of them are aimed at moving towards more and more inner harmony, more and more of a peaceful state within, and living day to day in a closer proximity to what's unpacked in the first 3 Yoga Sutras, which says that when we're not in the turnings of the mind, when we're not in the spinnings of our sort of samskaras, which is sort of the habits and patterns of our mind, then we're residing in our true nature. So if we say that, then the observances are also a way to stay close to what the essence of the yoga practice is about. So we said that the yamas and the niyamas are checkpoints to see how things are going. So just as we started to notice how the teachings of the yamas weave one upon another, we also see that when it comes to the niyamas, the 5 niyamas, as we see each one of them in relationship to the one that came before, and each of them also stand on their own. So this is where we are. And as we look at what's recommended, then we can also then weave in what we talked about in the most recent episode, Boons. So we'll actually weave the niyama conversation through, here's the teaching and here's what the teaching yields, so that we can get the two pieces together.
I love it.
Awesome. So shall we start with the first one?
Let's do it.
So the first niyama that's listed is saucha, which is often described as cleanliness. And anyone who's been to a yoga asana studio may be familiar with this word, because a lot of times, it's listed as sort of clean your mat, clean the space around your mat, take a shower before you come to yoga so it's more pleasant for everyone to be around you. And that is absolutely one expression for sure of saucha. But beyond that, we can also look at it as simplicity, purity, and refinement. So simplicity, so underutilized. I for myself, I love complexity. I love to unpack the complexity. But what I do find more and more as the years go by is the simplest things are the most clear, so they're the hardest to avoid.
Good point.
So, so there's a level of simplicity and purity that can feel a little edgy, but part of saucha is, and there's a lot of, outcomes of what happens when one observes saucha. So if you think of it on that surface level of just cleanliness, one of the outcomes that some of the writers would say is that through observing cleanliness, we come to understand the impermanent nature of everything. So think of it this way: you clean your house, it's clean, then you live in it. Then the next day you have to clean your house again because it needs to be cleaned again, right? So there's the level of maintaining physical cleanliness of the body. We start to notice, like, you know what, this body is shifting and changing and it is impermanent. And so I'm constantly tending to it. So we see sort of like the impermanence. When we tend to cleaning things in our house, then we start to notice how things eventually begin to deteriorate and have to be replaced. And so that's one possible sort of looking at what do you gain through observing saucha, if we talk about it on that level of physical cleanliness. But saucha can go deeper than that. It can be more like observing everything that goes into our body can be part of that too. In the sense of purity, like what am I going to feed my body, and then observing how what I feed it has an outcome on how I feel. We can apply saucha to what we read and what we engage in as entertainment. Because, the idea is that, so with everything we eat, we know our body has to process and eliminate and work with everything that we put in it. And so our mind is the same. Everything that we consume mentally then also has to be processed and filtered, and some of it eliminated, and then some of it remains. And so saucha is a call to say, to observe what it is that we're putting into our field. And saucha you could even apply to the company that you keep. So many traditions encourage us to keep good company. And if you're sensitive and you are observing, then you notice that you keep company with certain people and you feel one way, keep company with other people and you feel a different way. So the, saucha is that just really an awareness of the quality of what we are bringing in, and then maintaining a certain level of clarity, purity, not in the sense of judgment, or I like the word refinement, sort of continuing to refine, what it is. I know when I first started practicing yoga, for instance, I became a lot more aware of how I felt every day because I was going to yoga every day. If I ate a lot of really heavy food, I would notice that the practice was a little more challenging. And of course, this is the step that comes before asana. And so we can look at it on a very practical level, that our practices of being physically present in our body and present to our breath, because the breath is a direct relationship with our nervous system, then we can start to notice, like, okay, I'm getting pretty adrenalated every time I watch this show. Maybe that's okay. Or maybe I might choose not to do this, because what it's doing is it's making my nervous system adjusted to and craving this high level of input in order to have like the crash later. So it's like, and it's an ongoing refinement. And again, we're looking at this from the lens, not from the outside in, like all of a sudden I got to clean up my life. Sometimes, sometimes we do want to do something like a cleanse, but honestly, what's far more effective for our sustained health on that level than sort of doing whatever we want and then doing this big dramatic cleanse. Actually, what's much more helpful is to just refine what we're consuming on a daily basis so that we don't have to do some big crazy cleanse that, you know, gives us a headache and makes us feel sick and we have to take a few weeks off and, you know, that kind of thing. So similarly, observing how what I'm consuming, what I'm putting in my mouth, in my eyes, in my ears, in my home, in my company, observing that outcome and continuing to refine it so that it's guiding me as a yogi in training down the path I want to go.
Yeah, I love that. And that is one of the things that happens when you practice yoga. You just start to get so much more aware. I say you as the collective you. But yeah, the discernment and that we are directly influenced by our environment, the company we keep, and then we choose to discern what is in our best interest. Sasya?
Saucha.
Saucha.
Yeah, saucha. Yeah, saucha. Yeah. Saucia is like if you like lots of sauces and they're all in your refrigerator.
Oh yeah, I use that word all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Saucha. Yeah. And we've been referencing a little bit the secret power of yoga, the way she describes the boom, the thing that you get when you practice saucha. She says, through simplicity and continual refinement, the body, thoughts, and emotions become clear reflections of the self within.
Ooh.
So, you know, this idea that if we aren't sort of giving our body disharmonious things to process, then our body is more in its own natural rhythms. If we similarly we stop giving our mind things that it has to sort of filter and work through in order to come back to a stable state, then it is more of a clear reflection. You know, it's like, I think it's like, you know, if you go to a lake and the lake's really clear and you see the trees around the lake perfectly reflected in the surface of the pond. If you want to keep seeing that, you don't keep throwing handfuls of rocks in and seeing the ripples happen again and again. You know? Nothing wrong with the ripples, but you're not going to get the same clear reflection. You'll get a distorted reflection. And so that's that refinement of saucha, is we stop creating so many ripples physically, mentally, emotionally. And then what our experience becomes that clear reflection of our truest nature.
That is a beautiful visual, that imagery. It makes so much sense when you put it like that.
Yeah, try to keep it more steady. Okay, put the rocks down.
And it is a choice. You know, I think a lot of all this philosophy stuff, I think sometimes we go from not thinking we have choices in life and we just react to life. And then for me, yoga's opened me up to realizing, oh yeah, you do have choices. And that's a lot of power.
I love what you just said, because yoga really is a practice about harnessing and using our power for good. And being at choice is an extremely powerful place to be. So yeah, that's a really wise understanding of what this is about. It's not about someone else exerting power over our behavior. It's about being at choice from inside versus our habits or our karma or our, you know, patterns having complete and utter power over us. Brilliant.
Thank you, Gia.
So the next observance that we have is Santosha. And Santosha is often described as contentment. And I think one of the best definitions I've heard of contentment is accepting the content of any given moment. And I really liked that, accepting the content of any given moment. So not wanting reality to be different than the way that it currently is. And I can remember the part of me that immediately wrestles with, but if I do that, then nothing will happen. And some of that is sort of, the pit of fire, but this idea, but wait, if I'm content, then maybe I'll never get off my couch again.
I could see that. Yeah, that feeling.
But the idea really in the teaching is that we come to a place of accepting the content of the present moment so that we can wisely respond to it. So that's one way to look at this teaching. If we start with saying it is accepting the contents of the given moment, any given moment, how can we take wise action if we aren't fully accepting where we are or where the world is around us? So this contentment. And also, I can think of lots of times when I acted based on my discontent. And that doesn't always land, it's like throws your aim off. Acting just because I am discontented, I'm not at peace with myself, and so I got to do something to try to change that feeling. Right? That's the long way around. We can do it as long as we want to, but it's the long way around. It takes a lot longer for me to change things outside of myself to try to shift the way that I feel inside than it does to sit long enough with what's going on with me to uncover the source of my discontent and do the inner work. It's like I'm bored, I'm going to rearrange the furniture. Well, that lasts for a few days, and then I have to rearrange the furniture again and rearrange the furniture again and rearrange, that kind of, that idea. So there's that piece that, and what's interesting about contentment, santosha, it comes before tapas, which is taking action. And so, and it comes right after saucha, which is the refinement. So there's a level of refinement, which we could say then generates contentment. So when we look at the relationships between the threads, which generates more peace within ourselves. From that place, then our tapas, which is our practice, the fire of practice, right? It's not reactive, nor is it fueled from the ripples on the top of the lake, but rather our practice is then from a place of peace within. I choose my action wisely. I choose my practice wisely. I engage my practice wisely. On a really practical level, we can look at how this plays out in the yoga asana practice. Okay? If I come to the yoga mat because I am discontented with something about myself, the quality of my practice is likely to suffer because I'm trying to prove something or fix something or change something. Versus, okay, santosha is my observance in this moment in time with all my foibles and faults and all the ways that I am working, towards more clarity. I accept myself exactly as I am today. And, then there's the the piece that says, and today I'm tired, so I'm going to proceed with caution. Right? Or, today I'm pretty fiery. I'm really angry. So do I want to channel that like kind of anger into my practice and my physical body? Or is there a moment to first settle and then move? Or proceed with caution, like I'm saying, like on a day when I know that I'm really fiery, if I just go with that wave, my likelihood of creating some kind of friction or injury with my body is a lot higher than if I say, wow, I'm pretty fired up today. I should take more child's pose rather than doing 800 handstands because there's a push from within me that's maybe making me less resonant and less present to what's the right choice to.
So it sounds a little bit like you could either react or you could respond to the reality that you're acknowledging. And contentment is about just acceptance of your current state or the current situation, sitting with it, which is probably not the funnest feeling in the world if you're an impatient person like myself. But then that gives you the moment, that gives you that time to choose to respond, is what I'm getting from this niyama.
Absolutely. And that's huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can see how that helps us avoid future suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that you're bringing that up because I think each of the observances do exactly what you just said. Ask us to take a little time. Ask us to be more self-reflective. And that's what's required to move towards a more harmonious experience. Right? So even if we go with that definition that they are observances, what does it take in order for us to observe something? We have to stop. You can't observe on the drive-by.
Yeah, you can't multitask observing.
No, it takes our absorption and our attention. But I would say that that we can do that with the mindset of I referenced Manorma before. My teacher, she gives this example. When we're doing this kind of self-observation, we want to do it like the way that a loving mother has an eye on her kid on the playground. Like you're out there, here you are, little guy doing your thing, getting on the swing, all that stuff, the observation of like, oh, okay, watch that one. But it's from guidance and love, not observing ourselves waiting to see like if we're going to take a wrong step, but rather more just really deeply wanting to know and understand and then guide our actions continually towards more clarity.
Hey friends, since we are now in a major world shift, and it's even more important now than ever to support one another and stand up for what and who we believe in. And I wanted to have a section in each episode called a Spotlight Corner, and I want it to highlight Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ plus communities, businesses, and organizations, specifically in those areas. And let me say, in no way is this a paid advertisement or a sponsorship. It's simply people and organizations who I think are awesome, and I would like to show my support in some way, and I hope to inspire you to support them as well. Somewhat recently, I had the wonderful Scout Shavers on the show. When you get a chance, check it out. It's episode 22, Yoga and Birth. Scout is a birth worker, a birth educator, a doula, a yoga teacher, and the founder of the organization Birth Wild Awake. This organization specifically supports Black, Indigenous, people of color, the doulas, as well as the families. The money is strictly used to provide educational scholarships to these doulas seeking mentorships and skill set to support these families. You may or may not already know, but systematic racism starts at birth. And I really believe in supporting this organization because there is such a need for more support in this particular area of the community. There's a couple of ways you can contribute to her organization. You can either give directly to Birth Wild Awake on Scout's website, scoutwildawake.com/donate. The link to that is in the show notes. There's a donate button that you can click on once you get there, or you can also buy her t-shirts on her website. I have a t-shirt and they are wonderful. They're soft, they fit well, and are high quality. They say on the front of them, Black birthing lives matter. I love mine. I wear it all the time. If you're able, please consider supporting Birth Wild Awake. Oh my goddess, you guys, I am a podcaster now. And if I would have known that making my own podcast was this easy, I would have started so much sooner. So take this as your official invite for Anchor. I use it for my podcast because it's the easiest way to make a podcast and it's free. Yes, free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. So easy. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you to all the major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. This has been by far my favorite hobby. And did you know you can also make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership? Anchor is everything you need to make your podcast right at your fingertips. We all have a story and something to share with the world. If you're curious about the medium of podcasting, I totally encourage you to download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor is spelled ANCHOR.
Yeah. And the boon for Santosha says, when at peace and content with oneself and others, supreme joy is celebrated. So what we get from contentment is exactly that. We feel content, and from a place of contentment, joy arises. So we're not, again, it's not in that mindset of we got to get it right, but it's like we want to create room for joy to arise. And in a state of discontent, it is not difficult for joy to find its way.
Totally. That makes sense. I've never been joyous when I've also been discontent. I don't think. I don't think that's ever happened.
I think it would take a very high level of refinement to be able to sort of contain. And that's also possible, at some point that we can feel a certain level of discontent over in one corner and also have room for like joy or love to be there. But in general, that's a thing that creeps out and takes up all the space. And so it's, and that not only takes up all the space, but then prompts us into action. And so as we look again, because our next step is tapas, is like to take action and to move into practice. So we want to make room to move into practice from joy, from clarity, from love, from discipline in the real essential meaning of that. Which the root is disciple, which comes from like a love of the practice rather than sort of doing the practice to ourselves. Our tapas, our fire. It's like we're not applying the fire to ourselves. We're doing that from a place of love. We put ourselves into the flame of practice so that we can continue to be refined and gain more clarity. It's a very different energy than throwing ourselves into the flames. You know.
Yeah, well, as just being a yoga student and learning this stuff very, very briefly, the niyamas, they say tapas, heat, and then that's it. And it's like, you think yes, I think of a flame. I think of like sweaty hot yoga, hardcore. Like that's the context. Tapas, heat, moving on. It's like there, yeah, I like how there's so much more depth that you're really describing what tapas is. So I really appreciate having a deeper understanding of that one, because that one was always a mystery.
And it does get thrown out a lot in hard practices that can be introduced as encouragement, but can also sometimes be perceived as like cracking the whip on yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially in
Or,
America.
yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think, the tapas, it's the purifying flame. Right?
Mm.
And so we don't just get heat from a flame. We get light. We get,
Wow.
we get illumination. And you can have a flame that will burn the shit out of you.
Yeah.
you know it just makes me think of sort of the fires that are going on in California right now. You can have a campfire that's warmth that people gather around, to sustain themselves. Or you could have a flame that's completely out of control and causing utter devastation. So when we get to tapas, anytime we start talking about fire and flame, we've got to have some reverence and respect for that. And how do we tend that flame? And there's both sides. There's the fire can get out of control and cause damage. And then there's also, like, if we don't tend to it with mindfulness, it can also go out. And so, we can't ignore our practice, or that purifying flame that brings illumination and clarity and light. That fire can go out. And also tending the flame, you put too much fuel on the fire gets too hot, we get burned. Burn out.
Yeah.
So tapas has an element built into it, the fact that it's related to fire or to flame says that we have to have a level of sort of reverence and respect for that step. Yeah. So it is fiery, and we are stepping in, and like, oh, it's not always pleasant, but we don't necessarily want to get burned, as it were. So it's interesting to look again at sort of different people's takes on kind of what how this unpacks and what we end up getting. And B.K.S. Iyengar, he describes tapa as a burning desire. And so there's also that says we, like, in order to enter into the practice, to put ourselves into the purifying flame, like, we have to have this burning desire to practice. So there's an element of, like, ignite the flame in you that wants to stay the course. Right? And that there's something sustaining about a burning desire, not a flash, but a burning desire. And that is another piece that we observe. What does it take for me to keep that burning desire alive? So we go back to this image of tending a fire. The desire we have to practice, we don't want to burn that out. We don't want to let it die. And so it takes a tending. So we can't take it for granted either. right? We can't take fire for granted. You can't leave it unattended. It might go crazy or it might go out. So,
Yeah.
so it goes back again to that sort of level of dedication. And then we've got like what is the boon, right? What happens when we've got these practices in place. So say we are tending to that burning desire for practice. When we listen to The Secret Power of Yoga, she says, living life with zeal and sincerity. I love zeal. Zeal. Don't be a zealot, but have zeal, right? Living life with zeal and sincerity, the purifying flame is ignited, revealing the inner light.
Oh.
Yeah. So tapas yields another Sanskrit word, which is tejas. So tapas is like tending the flame. Tejas is the light that comes.
Oh.
So this is, remember, because we're looking at this as also a way to check in on our practice and to guide our practice. So are our practices of yoga, is it just making us like a fiery flame? Or is the light of awareness coming? So it's not just for the sake of being fiery.
Mm-hmm.
And that just brings me back to the thing that you brought up, which is, you know, I want to be so clear in how I say this, because I have been someone who has been so in love with the fire that I've forgotten to look for the light.
Mm.
And, you know, we can get so engulfed in the zeal that we can become zealots, right? So zeal and enthusiasm for what? For the light that comes, not just for being in the fire all the time.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah, that totally
communicating?
makes sense. Like the boon is the light, is the tapas is the heat, that is the fire, that is the discipline, that is the desire for your practice, and then the result, the wonderful effect from that practice is the light. And something that you keep bringing up is the word, I believe, pure flame, purity in the flame. And then the first niyama, cleanliness, purity. I just find that interesting that that's coming up again, purity. And when I think of purity, you also mentioned sincerity. That's like being genuine, being sincere for your practice. Like when I think of purity, in yoga, I think of those words. So I just wanted to also iterate that the purity is interesting. It's coming up multiple times in this.
Right. You know, and in yoga, when we're looking at sort of these yoga teachings, we can also really look at the elemental teaching, right? Which is, so we think about, how does fire work, right? So if you are wanting to, like ghee, the process of clarified butter, right? So it's called clarified butter, and if anybody listening isn't familiar with ghee, it's it's a well-loved sort of it's part of Ayurveda, and it's also just a great cooking tool. And so this comes from a country where there's usually lots of cows, because they're not eaten, they're revered. So from the milk comes the butter, and then to clarify it, you have to heat it, and you can't burn it. And so you watch how much flame, you add just enough flame so that the butter solids separate from the more clean cooking and eating the clarified butter, the ghee. And so that's kind of what we're looking at, is that we enter into these practices, we apply a level of intensity so that we can clarify right? What is a value that we keep, and then what we scoop off the top and get rid of. So we apply the element of tapas so that we can see where the impurity is. So I think about this like, I get on the yoga mat, and lately, I used to be like the zealot, like go hard, go strong, go strong. Lately, what I'm observing on the mat, the thing that is getting clarified for me is I have the I don't wannas right now. I just don't wanna. I don't want to be disciplined. And maybe that's because I've just been left to my own devices for a very long time, and other people might be experiencing this, like not having the shared energy of practicing together. It can be harder to get on our mats and work at the same sort of level of zeal. And so, but what I'm seeing on my mat is exactly the same thing that's getting in my way everywhere else in my life. So I step onto the mat and I apply the tapas of, here I am in a contained environment. I'm taking class from one of my teachers, and I'm being asked to do something I don't want to do. And I just feel the resistance so strong. Like, I don't want to. And then it comes a voice that's like, I don't really have to. I can just turn off my screen and lay down. Right. And then on a good day, some days I do that, and then later I'm like, go back and try that again. But on a good day, that's where the solid starts to separate from the thing that I'm after. Right. The thing that I'm after is the part of me that knows that sometimes going past this egoic resistance is exactly what I need to do to get back to a place of more clarity and remember what I'm about and what I want to be up to in my life. Because the I don't want to just has me sort of, wasting a lot of time. And that's okay. I'm allowed to a certain degree, but at the same time, because I've engaged the path, that's the tapas, right? The tapas is, you have engaged the path, keep tending the flame, remember the zeal, remember why you're here, remember what you're doing. And so to me, that is like, that's what we're doing. That burning, keep stoking that burning desire to move along in the path you've chosen. Tapas. Clearly I'm a little passionate about this.
Well, I was laughing because the I don't wannas on the yoga mat, I completely, well, full disclosure, summer's not my favorite season. And as we're recording this, it's summer, and that resistance you're talking about, I do feel like the yoga practice, when I can get myself to actually move, it does burn away that big block of resistance. But it this time of year for me personally, it's just super hard. So I really related to what you were saying.
Yeah, cool. That's good to hear. And I do think it's a little harder sometimes to maintain our zeal for practice when we're on our own with it more.
Definitely.
That's not to say that it's not perfect, because we go to the step before and we say, well, this is the content of my present reality. And how am I going to tend my flame? And like it's a beautiful step, actually. Part of the santosha is accepting the content of, you're like, I don't really love to practice in the summer. And so then how do I tend my flame? Probably not going to tend your flame by rolling your mat out outside at noon to try to make it happen. No. It's like what do I need to do? So if you've ever tried to keep a fire going, to get it going, it's a lot of love and care, and you have to shove things around, and to keep it going, it's like, do I need to add more? Is that enough? So yeah, tapas. Yeah, then and I was also going to share what Mr. Iyengar says in his version of the sutras. He says tapas, he defines as self-discipline. Self-discipline burns away impurities and kindles the sparks of divinity. So that's I like that, especially when we say that the sparks of divinity are us returning to our true nature, right?
Oh.
So, because if it's burning away impurities, then what is purity? Because we've been talking about that word a lot. So what is purity? It's like when we're the closest to our truest self.
Yeah.
So
we're clarified better.
Yeah, we're burning off. Yeah, so we're burning off like the parts of us that are resistant to, the parts of us that are resistant to the depth of who we are, or the parts of us that confuse us, that pull us away from our true nature. So tapas leads us right into the next niyama, which is svadhyaya, which is always fun to say. Svadhyaya.
Svadhyaya. That is.
Svadhyaya. Yeah. And svadhyaya is sometimes it's called self-study. And sometimes it's more referred to as the study of the divine through scripture, nature, and introspection. I like that definition a lot. So it is observing ourselves, but it's also study. It's just saying like, hey, one of the observances is to study. So study nature and the rhythms of nature. Study ourselves. Become a student of yourself. Observe the nature around you. Observe your own inner nature. And then study teachings that uplift you, that help you, that motivate you. So whether that's the yogic teachings or A Course in Miracles or, there's so many great teachers out there. I was trying to name one and I had like a total traffic jam in my mouth. So if you pick up, those of you that are listening, thank you so much for continuing to listen to this 3-part series on the yamas and the niyamas. And if the teachings of yoga motivate and uplift you, and they help you have more clarity on your nature, on the nature of the world, then great. And if it's not that, find the thing that it is. If you are a Christian and you love the teachings of the Bible, then that's your svadhyaya, that's your study. But it's the combination of observing ourselves, observing the world around us, and then finding sources of wisdom to add into, so that we have more wisdom. So svadhyaya is the thing that comes, if we start looking at the order, then we say, reflect on the tapas. Reflect on the action. Reflect on the practice. And that can happen during or after, and hopefully both. Hopefully during the action of self-discipline, we're observing what's getting purified, and then later we feel what was the outcome of that most recent self-discipline, my most recent practice. Svadhyaya, observation. I think that many of us as yoga practitioners could really benefit from remembering this step. And in fact, we're saying that the yamas and the niyamas are one way to do that. It's one way to observe, how's my practice going? Am I becoming more loving and kind? Am I becoming non-stealing, or am I becoming more and more obsessed and getting a pose that someone else next to me has? Is the ignited flame burning me alive, or is it giving me more clarity on myself, and on the nature, on my nature, on the nature of things, watching and observing, listening to my own wisdom and intuition that is part of svadhyaya. Am I as that inner lake is getting more and more still, what is reflected? And am I taking that in and learning from it? Swadhyaya. And then we can look again at what Mr. Iyengar, how he describes the self-study leads towards the realization of God or communion with one's desired deity.
Wow.
Right. So if we follow what he just said, then we say that self-study reveals to us that we are created in the nature of the Creator.
I had no idea.
Right?
It's a pretty big perk.
It's a huge perk, right? And what we gain from that is also like we are looking for that. I'm not looking for the ways I fall short. I'm not looking for the ways that I miss. I'm looking for that, you know, through my studies. I'm not, because I think this can happen, and maybe it's just me, but I know that in my past, you know, we can engage teachings like this in a way of noticing all the ways that we're not there yet, all the ways we're not good enough. We can turn our yoga practice into a self-help practice. And that's not really what it's in its essence offering us. In its essence, it's offering us clear away the impurities. You know, get the drama out of your life so that you can know that you in your essential nature are that deepest self. So, you know, we're not self-studying. Our svadhyaya is aimed at seeing the divinity awake and alive through more and more clarity.
Wow. When you're describing all this, I keep thinking of the word curiosity, and maybe it's a little like maybe it's more superficial to, but self-study, observing, reawakening to the reality of you are part of the divine. I just, curiosity I think is a good maybe starting point. Like, what did that practice where I burnt the resistance off of me, what is the result of that? Like, it's a good way, I think, to ease into this idea. I always am intrigued by, well, I'm curious about many things, and so that word really comes up for me with Svadhyaya.
And I love that you brought up curiosity, because for me, in the nervous system regulation work that I do in somatic experiencing, you know, we know that we're moving out of a frozen or fearful state when we can become curious.
Oh.
So it's like introducing curiosity is the absolute realization that we are fully present and that we have stepped out of freeze, we've stepped out of fight or flight, we've stepped out of the state of fear, and we can now become curious.
Oh, I never knew that was a sign of nervous system regulation or anything like that. So, learning a lot today.
Totally, totally. Like when we are genuinely curious, we are open and present and available. So, right, we've shifted from judgment, we've shifted from fear, we've shifted from so many different things in order to be curious. So that's a beautiful way to say, yeah, that's another engaged svadhyaya. Get curious. Get curious. I love that. Yeah. Then the next and final teaching that we have of these five steps, or five, really they're five teachings in and of themselves, and they're interrelated, but the last one is Ishvara Pranidhana. And a simple way to say that is surrender to a higher power.
Ooh.
Or a recognition that there are greater forces at play than just us. A recognition that we take no action alone. I don't breathe myself. I didn't make the earth that I walk on.
Good
I
point.
didn't birth myself. I wouldn't be here without my mother and my father, no matter what sort of current relationship or connection that I have with them, whether they're here or not, I didn't get here without them.
Mm-hmm.
So Ishvara Pranidhana can absolutely have the connotation of a direct relationship with the creator, God, the universe, goddess, whatever word we choose for that. And even if we don't want to choose a word for that, it is the last observance that keeps us in balance, is to observe that we do not act on our own. And because of that, we also are not fully responsible for the outcomes of our actions, nor can we take full credit for the outcomes of our actions. And so there's a level of surrender that's part of this final step. And whether you have a personal relationship and a name for that greater power that you surrender to, or you think of it more as recognizing that you don't act alone in the world, it's the thing that keeps our ego in check, and it gives us the freedom to let go of the outcome, whether the outcome is exactly what we wanted or not at all what we wanted. So this final of the 10 steps, if we put them all together, says Ishvara Pranidhana, right? And so this one is described in The Secret Power of Yoga through wholehearted dedication. We become intoxicated with the divine. So that's one way to think of it. And then because we're gaining something from having these two different perspectives, Mr. Iyengar says surrender to God brings perfection in samadhi, the final state, which is being fully absorbed in understanding that there is no separation between us and everything around us. So Ishvara Pranidhana, he describes as surrender to God, and she describes as wholehearted dedication, Ishvara Pranidhana. So Ishvara Pranidhana has been, in my experience of teaching and sharing these teachings, has been one of the niyama that people have struggled with the most. I think because we have a complicated relationship with faith and a complicated relationship with the concept of that. But I would say, even if you are a self-proclaimed atheist, it's not hard to acknowledge that there's more than us.
Yeah.
You know? And so if we look at those last three, so the last three niyamas are also the 3 steps of what's called Kriya Yoga, which is the yoga of action. So if we extract those 3 and we say these are the 3 steps of Kriya Yoga, then we can say Kriya Yoga, the yoga of action, is tapas first, disciplined action. So if you're looking at the yoga of action, you have to take action. Step 1. Step 2, I took the action, svadhyaya. I'm reflecting on the outcome of my action. How did it go? Did it go well? Did I achieve my aim? Did I miss my mark? What am I learning here? And then that 3rd step is to surrender the outcome. And this also ties into the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a whole nother conversation, but just this idea that you have right to the action, but not to the fruits of your action. So Ishvara Pranidhana in the teaching of Kriya Yoga echoes this, that says, take action. If you're going to be about the yoga of action, it's not yoga of action if you're not acting, self-disciplined action. 2, reflect on it. Don't just take action. Learn from the action that you're taking so you can continue to refine it. And 3, then you just surrender it so you can start over, because otherwise you can get real hung up on it, right? Say the action, absolutely hit your mark. Awesome, great. Thank you, forces that are supporting me to be alive and in action in the world. Next action. Or, wow, I sure missed the mark. How many of us can get really caught in that and paralyzed in sort of stuck, like, oh, I tried this thing and it really didn't go right and I'm never going to try again. No, you also say, I didn't act alone and I'm surrendering the outcome. Doesn't mean we keep making the same mistakes, because Svadhyaya is in the middle. Mm-hmm. So, and disciplined action is action aimed at clarity. So the Kriya Yoga, when we put those 3 things together, says we take action, we reflect on our action, we surrender, we let it go so that we can move into action again and continue on that path.
When you put it in those 3 terms, that makes more sense. And what it sounds a little bit like to me is, 1, building resiliency, 2, no ego, or leaving your ego at the door, and 3, humbling, very humbling.
There's a humility that's required to acknowledge that there are greater forces acting in the world upon us, and this is a struggle that we have in the West. We have this struggle because we like to think we are masters of our own fate. And yes, that is true. But that's not the only thing that's true. Yes, we are masters of our own fate. And there are so many factors that are acting upon us as well. This brings this piece, right? That humility. There's that humility that is being required by many of us who are waking up to saying, yes, systemic racism is real. And because of the color of my skin, I have had a lot of things supporting me because I'm white, and because of the color of other people, even my friends' skin, in order to be where I am, there's a way in which they've had to work harder. And my humility comes in admitting that. And instead of saying I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, I can say I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, but I was already 10 steps ahead. And that humility helps me, recognize the significant accomplishments of my friends of color. I'm so blown away, at the many ways that they have moved through and stepped above. And it makes me humble rather than judgmental of others who have started from a place that I don't understand. And maybe they're not where I am, but can I, in my humility, recognize, right, that there are greater forces that have been acting upon me and acting upon them, and beginning to come to a place. This is something I've been thinking about quite a bit. I think a lot of us have been thinking about and working with quite a bit. So yes, you can say Ishvara Pranidhana is surrender to God. And that would be, according to Mr. Iyengar, that would be an accurate interpretation of it. And there's the bigger context, I believe, really, of, like you just brought forward, Ishvara Pranidhana is surrendering to a higher power and acknowledging that there are so many other powers acting upon us. And I think it is it's a good time for us to start to to stop trying to not have that conversation, stop trying to ignore that part, and say we are both masters of our own fate and absolutely dictated by fate as well. And the reason I say we struggle with this in the West is that, at least in the context of the teachings of yoga, there was always acknowledgement of Vedic astrology. And the essential teaching of Vedic astrology is that you are born with karma. You're born, into, and we know this, we're born into a certain family with certain privileges and certain restrictions. We're born into a certain country with certain privileges and certain restrictions, and and then along the line of life, things happen that are beyond our control that we then can respond to. So Ishvara Pranidhana, tapas is taking our disciplined action. Swadhyaya is observing the outcome of our actions and learning from the wisdom of others. And then that final step, the last of the 10. So we look at the first, loving kindness, and the last, surrender, humility. And then the whole arc in between. And that's sort of where we land when we look at the first two limbs of yoga that are laid out. And the next place we go is asana. So then, get in your body and do the work.
What an intelligently designed system. Like, it's so ancient, but so wise, so thought out, so deep. And that's just, the two limbs, and then the asana is the third, and then there's 5 more. It's incredible.
Yeah, there's so many other, teaching in the sutras too about, how we can do this work within ourselves. But it's a beautiful system, and I would invite myself and you and all of the listeners also, feel free to wrestle with any of the teachings. Because they're not here to be believed. They're here to be engaged and experienced and lived. And we'll all live it in our own way. That's also why it's so great to bring in more than one translation sometimes and see different lived experiences. This is Swadhyaya, right? So
thank you so much, Gia. Do you have anything in the next coming weeks or months, any workshops?
Well, you can always find, I'm teaching online a couple times a week, and going to be adding more classes to my online studio. So you can check that out, giocondayoga.com. That's GIOCONDAYOGA.com. I do offer quarterly mentoring programs for yoga teachers who are interested in different aspects of study. So the next one that's coming up is called The Power of Voice. And that's actually open to teachers and practitioners of yoga who are interested in this sort of 3-month life study. Really is what The Power of Voice is. But how do we learn to find our voice and use it in a powerful way?
All right. Thank you so much, Gia. And I hope to have you back on the show soon.
Can't wait for next time, Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed and felt inspired from today's episode about yoga and the Niyamas with the knowledgeable Gioconda Parker. This concludes our 3-part series with Gia of the Yamas, the Boons, and the Niyamas. Check out her previous 2 episodes she did with us. If you have not yet had the pleasure, it really ties this episode all together. I really like the way Gia explains such a complex subject and makes it accessible for us to apply to our daily lives. And if you would like to connect with Gioconda further, all of her info is linked down in the show notes. If you liked what you heard, please share with your friends. Please consider joining the Yoga and Podcast Patreon. There are great member perks such as shoutouts on the show, virtual yoga, and we even send you love notes filled with podcast stickers, and you pay what you like. You can find that info in the show notes as well. If you would like to help the podcast in a different way, please leave us a glowing review wherever you listen to your podcast. It really makes a difference when you leave reviews wherever you listen. Our email is yogaandpodcast@gmail.com. The and is spelled out YOGAAND podcast@gmail. Please follow us on Instagram. Our handle is also Yoga and Podcast, and let us know if you have any specific topics for future episodes or requests for future guests. We now have merch such as coffee mugs, tote bags, t-shirts, and more. You can check that out on my website at ashleyweberyoga.com/podcast. And remember that this podcast is for everyone. If you're a human living on planet Earth, you might benefit from Yoga and Podcast. See you next week.